Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 29 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. Thank you for joining us. In this episode, we have one of my favorite subjects that I actually teach in the class. It's a subject we call group therapy. So if you're into training and getting better as a shooter, we have some lifelong secrets that we would like to share with you. Also in this podcast, we're going to be talking about 3 myths in the custom rifle building world and that we would like to say or put as debunked. So we want to talk about a lot of the stuff that's going on in the industry and how to keep an eye out for the imitations. Then last but not least, we are excited to share with you some results that we've gotten in over the course of the last 6 months. We've had some of our product in the hands of some government entities that have been looking at the ACE system. And we are happy to report that some of the results are in, and it is fantastic. So we want to share with you some of that information as well. So thank you for joining us. And without further ado, here we go. All right, so right out of the gate, let's talk about a subject called group therapy. If you're into shooting, and like most shooters or most people in professional atmospheres or those that are training athletes, you're going to plateau. And you're going to get to a point in your shooting career or your shooting abilities that you're just going to stop growing and you're going to start seeing no gain in accuracy, no increase in success. You're going to stop on the podium, so to say. We had a recent customer, Josh, that had doing really well. He had attended our shooting school. I believe he is now in the top 10 in the category. I'm not sure if it's a regional PRS or national, but he's doing really, really well. And Josh had asked, well, what's some ways that I could practice and train to move up through the ranks? Now, we cover this in the shooting school itself, and sometimes it takes coming through the school once or twice for a lot of this stuff to really sink in. It's not uncommon for guys to come through the school, and on the third time of us talking about a particular subject, their eyes get big and they look at you like, well, that's pretty awesome. I get it. I can't believe I've heard that for the third time now, and I'm now just getting it. The group therapy, I think, is one of those things that, once you start going through and practicing, that it starts to make more and more sense. So for those that have been to the school and that are listening to the podcast, this is old hat, something we talk about a lot. But this was a subject that I actually created and wrote the curriculum for because it's how I learned to train. And so this goes hand in hand with, answering Josh's email here on what he can do to become a better shooter. So to give you the backstory on the whole subject is I was training, I was competing, I was doing really well, but there were a couple of shooters that, if I took second, they took first. If I took third, they took second. It was just they were always at 1 or 2 points ahead of me. And it made me step back and think about how I train and how can I train smarter and more efficiently. What am I doing that I am plateaued right now that I just can't beat these 1 or 2 competitors? And that led me into thinking about this subject of group therapy. It's how I train and how I've started training since that time. I have had the opportunity to compete against these individuals and have surpassed them and beat them in matches, which was not a goal to beat them in particular, but to grow as a shooter, to be able to throw my hat in the ring and keep working and getting better. And I think that's sort of how you know you're getting better, is you can watch the results when you're throwing your hat in the ring with a lot of great shooters, and you can see, how you're comparing, not trying to beat anybody. I always say that at the matches, you're only competing against yourself. Everybody's throwing their hat in the ring and somebody's going to come out wearing the winner's hat. And that person had everything right that day. They fundamentally, mentally, equipment, and they deserve a congratulations and a way to go. And so you keep throwing your hat in the ring and you keep trying to improve as a shooter. So the subject group therapy, we wrote it and put it in our book a while back, probably more than 8 years ago anyway. And we share it with the class because it really gets your mindset about shooting and training efficiently rather than going to the range and just blazing rounds downrange. So group therapy, a lot of people think when they go to the range that they want to fire groups. And I'm going to let you in a little secret here. I personally think firing groups outside of testing loads, I think it's a waste of ammo, and I think it kills sharpened skills, and it teaches you nothing but to get 5 lucky rounds into a small hole to brag about it. Like playing cards, honestly, you're going to wind up with a winning hand eventually, or you're going to put 3 really nice shots inside the same hole, and you're going to not shoot the other 2 rounds at it because you're afraid to blow that one nice group open, and so you just stop at 3. And so there's lots of really nice 3-shot groups out there. So one thing that I've personally learned to do, and something that will sharpen your skills to a razor's edge, and Josh, this is for you to help you with your training as you're getting ready to go into these more advanced matches for PRS. You want to shoot single shot bullseyes. Being accountable for one shot only, hit or miss. There's no do-overs, there's no follow-ups. Or everything rides on your ability to squeeze that one shot. Knowing you're only as good as your ability to place that one shot. So when I go to the range, I'll put up a target that might have 5 or 6 bullseyes on it. And my goal is from the standing position, build my position from scratch and shoot at one bullseye. But then I'm going to get off the rifle. I'm going to wait 1-2 minutes. Then I'm going to get back down on the rifle, rebuild my position from scratch all over again, and shoot another shot, but at a different bullseye. And I will repeat this process maybe 5 or 6 times. Now, if you want to check load, how the rifle's performing or load data, you really could overlap all the bullseyes, and that'll give you load performance or your group size. But I will tell you that you'll learn more shooting those 6 shots that way than by shooting 6 5-shot groups. The reason being, because you had to rebuild your shooting position with every single time, with memory and with feel. So with our mental checklist, you're going through and you're verifying that everything's right before you shoot. But when you start working on single shot bullseyes, you're rebuilding these positions from scratch each and every single time. As you keep doing this over and over again, you get faster at building a position, you get more repeatable at building a position, and you'll recognize when things are wrong faster. You're going to feel the rifle, your cheek weld, your hand squeeze, all of these things will become sensitized and will actually be on your mind when you're ready to shoot. Having done all this work, especially when shooting single shot bullseyes, the shots will be placed better, the shots will be placed more consistent, and your follow through and concentration will go up 50 to 100%. Become a more in-tune shooter with your rifle and leave the groups to groupies. Also, remember the basic fundamentals. Each should be part of your mental checklist. You can do 5 things right and 1 thing wrong, and it actually mean a complete miss. So doing everything the same way every time is our goal when we're practicing. And just always remember that little things matter. Little things matter when you're getting into this type of shooting. So when I go to the range, I don't shoot 50, 60, 80, 100, 200 rounds unless I'm practicing something odd, like let's just say a multiple shot, barricade scenario, or multiple targets at different distances and maybe a timed sequence. When I go to the range to practice on fundamentals, I actually don't shoot a lot of rounds. I'm focused on fundamentals. If you take the average shooter, especially with today's world, so in today's world, everybody has work. You've got family, you've got the grass to mow, you've got something that needs painted, you got the garage that needs to be cleaned up. I mean, I can give you a list of things that always seem to get in the way of shooting. So when you get a chance to go to the range, the first thing you do is you grab 5 rifles and 4 bags of ammunition and you run out the door and you try to get as much shooting in as you can. You get to the range, you get down to the target board, you staple up your multiple targets, right down the line, like you hang up like 15 different sets of targets. You go back to the to the bench, you pull up your chair, you sit down to shoot, you build your shooting position, and you shoot. And you shoot. And you shoot. And you keep shooting. But how many times did you build your shooting position from scratch? The answer is once. This is the key to training this way, is it makes you rebuild your position every single time. Now, I promise you this, it will make you feel like a worse shooter. Your groups are going to open up because it's really easy to shoot nice groups laying in the same position prone without picking your head up off the rifle, just working the bolt and follow-up shot, working the bolt and follow-up shot. You can shoot really nice groups prone. But when you make people break position and make them have to rebuild that entire position from scratch over again, if they're not touching the rifle in the exact same way with the exact same pressure, they're going to influence the placement of the shot. And you're going to see it. And so by shooting and practicing this way, at first it's probably going to make you feel like a lousy shooter because you're going to have some flyers. You're going to have some targets that don't have the shots on the bullseyes. But eventually, you're going to be able to lay there, shoot a shot, get up, get back down, build your position, shoot a shot, get up, break position, get back down. You're going to do this 6 times on 6 different bullseyes, and you're going to hit all 6. We had some customers last year. It was a father-son team with some of our school rifles. We have 3rd-inch dots that we train this drill on. And there was something like, I believe, 12 or 13 dots. They're the size of maybe an M&M to peanut M&M type dot. They're not very big at all. And this is 100 yards. The father and son both hit or touched almost every single dot, rebuilding their position from scratch. That, as a shooter, is phenomenal. That fundamentally is hard to do. And I can't say how proud I was of these guys. And you couldn't have erased the grin from their faces, with the largest eraser. I mean, they were just gleaming. But they were both shooting side by side, and it was amazing to watch that they did that. It was great shooting. That's what we really want to be able to do. And so when you're practicing and you're training and you're trying to get better as a shooter, start focusing on quality shooting rather than volume. Focus on fundamentals, this circle, this bubble around the shooter himself, and all the things that you should get right before you pull the trigger. And try to focus on making that repeatable. So it's a subject we call group therapy. So if you attend the school, you're going to hear this whole speech, and we're going to go through all this and talk about it. Of course, we go into a lot of details with the rifles and how things happen and interact with each other. The subject is called group therapy. Josh, this is for you if you're listening. I know you've heard this in the class, but if you really want to grow as a shooter, focus on quality shooting, not quantity shooting. Now, in the next subject here, we want to talk about some common myths that are happening in long-range shooting or custom rifles, I would say. And we're finding this a lot, actually. It's sort of funny. I guess maybe a little bit of flattering. But there seems to be several places now that are offering pre-built rifles for sale. They're companies. In other words, they're not builders. They're companies. And one of them in particular sort of is following us and copying our builds and almost our pricing. Well, at least until recently. So what they're doing is they're purchasing all the components and they're building these rifles. They look almost like twins with the exception, of course, the Ace, which is our proprietary or patented property. But one of our instructors had called and said, hey, I've been watching this for a while and getting emails. It's like every time you change something, you can see it on their website, whether it's pricing or some of the stocks that we use, some of the barrel lengths, some of the barrels, so on and so forth. I want to throw out there a couple of things to just caution, when you're starting to see a lot of Me Too's pop up. These companies, and I'm not going to throw any names out there. If you search, you might find them, and you may figure out who we're talking about. But they're purchasing components as a company that wants to make money, and they're sending them off to a gunsmith somewhere at the lowest bid to assemble them, and then they're coming back, and they look the part. A custom rifle, once it's Cerakote and in the stock, they're selling you a rifle for what seems to be a pretty attractive price. A customer had brought this up to us as well. And I just want to throw the caution out there is, I said this in one of the last podcasts with all the Me Too companies popping up. Everybody's sort of cashing in on the custom rifle craze, or they're trying to build stuff for sale. But be careful when you're buying these products, because even though they look the part, get ready. If you want your rifle that was built, that looks the part, but was actually subcontracted out to a secondary gunsmith or another company at the lowest price, granted, I will guarantee it, they're not going to the best gunsmiths on the planet and asking them to build or chamber or do whatever they're doing. They're going to the guy that can do it at the best price because they want to increase their margins. You're going to get what you pay for on this one. So be careful on that one. So just because they look custom doesn't mean that they're going to shoot any better than a factory rifle. So that's the first one. There's a lot of clones or Me Too's coming out there. The other thing that we sort of want to debunk here a little bit is, I don't care if it's a Savage. I don't care if it's a Gunworks or anyone in between. They're all building rifles the exact same way. They're using different components. Of course, Savage is doing it in a very efficient, high-volume manner because they're trying to sell a product at a very reasonable price. So they're pounding these rifles out by the hundreds of thousands. And then you've got, on the other end, these they sort of custom rifle builders that are doing nothing more than what the factory's doing, but at a really super less efficient manner. But they're using the same exact technique. So I'm always throwing this out there because the whole spectrum from the cheapest, Savage, which, by the way, I am not bashing Savage at all. I've actually shot them. I think Savages shoot really great for the money. That's amazing that they can build those rifles. But I find it funny that there's no technological difference in them other than somebody's trying to make their own stocks now. Well, that's been done 1,000 times. There's 1,000 stock makers out there. That's not groundbreaking. They're using their own bottom metal. Well, you're not doing that because it's better. Odds are you're doing it because it's a little bit less expensive. You have your own in-house machining, so you're going to try to take full advantage of that. I get that. But when it comes to the most critical portions besides the action, when you drill that barrel out, you're still using 1880 technology. Whether it's Savage or whether it's the most expensive custom rifle that you can find out there. As soon as you drill that barrel, you're degrading the quality or potential accuracy of that barrel. And in a lot of cases, depending on the gunsmith doing it, you're really degrading it. And a subcontracted gunsmith, well, good luck with that. All of these barrels have curvature of the bore, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Savage or a $7,000 custom rifle by the latest craze on TV. They are all using 120-year-old technology to chamber that rifle. None of them have taken any steps forward to bring our beloved rifles into the 21st century. So this technique is the same techniques that was used before the planes were in the air, before automobiles. I mean, I can just give you a list of things that weren't around when they were using this technique of drilling the barrel. And we're still using it today. So you still have curvature of the bore. You can't get away from it. There's no way to do it without it. And that reamer's running in there. It's following the curvature of the bore. And it's cutting out of round chambers. It's cutting chambers that can have, just weird oversize, conal, crooked throats. I mean, just the laundry list of problems that they can have. So when you're buying a custom rifle, I really don't care whether it's a custom rifle by their chambering technique is just less efficient, but it's the same way. All you're paying for is the inefficiencies of their process. It's a bunch of Me Too's doing it on a smaller scale. So be careful where you spend your hard-earned money, and be careful that you're getting what you're paying for. I guess that would be myth number 2. The last part I want to talk about is when you get into rifle designers, or what we would consider like myth number 3 when you get into custom rifles. There's a lot of people that are experts in different areas of these fields. So, for example, I don't consider myself a stock expert at all. All I can do is shoot them and evaluate them and use the groups of a known rifle to see whether or not that stock is holding. I can measure it. There's other things I can do, but am I interested in designing our own stock? No, I don't think I can do a better job than, say, Macmillan or Accuracy International. The reason I bring up this third myth is, besides the rifles, there's a lot of Me Too's jumping in the stock making market, and it's causing a lot of problems. Accuracy International, the AT and AX chassis, Macmillan, they have been around a long time, and there were really awesome designers and experts in their fields building these. And then we've come into an age where people can now replicate, or at least appear to replicate, what looks like a similar product. Again, a Me Too product. But be so ever careful. There are chassis that we will not build on, because we can take one of our rifles that's capable of shooting in the 2s and 3s and just simply take it and put it into another chassis, which, by the way, should not have to be bedded. And the group's double, if not triple in size. So when we have customers call and ask, and they're saying, hey, I like this chassis because of the feel or because of the look, we sort of look at them differently and say, okay, they look the part, they feel the part, but do they do the part? I always try to stay with a known entity who are experts in their field. So Macmillan, Accuracy International, all of these guys, Accuracy International was the British sniper stock. They had gone through how much testing and evaluation, and to make a stock that aided in the increase in accuracy, had the ability to be bounced around and dropped and smacked around and pick up and still shoot well. So just like the rifles, and we're saying, be careful on the Me Too stuff. Just because it looks custom doesn't mean you're getting anything better than a $600 Savage, other than a lot less money in your bank account. So stocks are the same way. It's become a commodity type industry where anybody with a CNC can now make an aluminum chassis. So be careful with that. I don't want to say that we're the experts in stocks and who makes good ones and who makes bad ones. But when new stocks come out, we test them. And we test them here a lot. And we can pick them out pretty quick. That, hey, if they won't shoot, we already know the barreled action shoots. We can put it in any of our other stocks and it shoots the same. But we'll put it in some of these chassis and the groups will open up, crazy flyers. The Me Too's are spilling over into the stock. So when you're building a custom rifle, make sure you're going with someone who really was a designer, someone who was looking at it and saying, how can we make this better from 20, 30 years ago? And have been doing it a long time. Someone that's been sort of an expert in their field, like Macmillan. When you get into rifle designing, and I think that's sort of where, Wolf Precision falls into, is we looked at problems and said, okay, we know as a builder that the curvature of the bore is a huge issue. We know that it affects the accuracy of the rifle. This is not something that's unknown in the industry or amongst custom rifle builders. But we took the time and the effort to do something about it, to try to rewrite the books, to say, what can we do to fix it? And that's sort of where the ACE come in, is we actually designed a part that never existed before in the history of bolt action rifles. And it worked, which is really cool. I do want to share with you, and I have to be really careful with this because we can't talk about who tests our rifles and what they're being used for. But we did get some results back from 2 government entities that have tested our rifles, and one of them actually has them right now shooting for a very important project. The first rifle that we sent out at the request of some government shooters went out as a very short-barreled .308 and 6.5 Creedmoor. Their current rifles were evaluated in a tunnel, in test fixtures, without human hands and without wind. So they have this baseline accuracy that these rifles have to meet. And we got a really cool report back from them that shot by hand in field conditions, that we beat their current line of rifles in accuracy by 20%. That was awesome. And for that particular government entity, we're getting ready to build them another one that's going to be even for more testing and evaluation. The next one I want to share with you is some results we just got back here a couple weeks ago. So we had some rifles that were at the request of a government agency that needed something very specific and very accurate for some very crucial work that they were doing. And they had been looking at our system and wanted to use it. So we had built several rifles that went out for this particular project. And their current acceptable accuracy rate, or what they were looking for, was 0.8 to 1.1 inches, which I never asked them. This is all conversations that happen after, which floors me that that's the acceptable accuracy rate. That's sort of what they were looking for to make their job easier. Initial test results with our system were 0.36 to 0.43 in test fixtures. So we basically cut their groups of their best expectations in half using the ACE system. So I am super excited that we were asked to be part of this project. I am really excited on the information that we're getting back. Their engineers were quite impressed, to say the least, and they were real happy that it was going to make the project that they were working on go a lot easier with that quality and that accuracy. That accuracy was done with factory ammunition. They weren't hand loads. So when you take people that are taking the industry and we're trying to make it a step forward, you'll see a lot of Me Too's pop up, people copying this and people copying that. But it takes years and years and years of hard work and research and development to bring these products to market. And there's a lot of secrets that go along with that as you learn and grow and change and modify. Like, say, for example, like the stocks. You could probably make a Macmillan A5 clone. You could probably machine it if you wanted. But what you can't get is the 30 years of all the engineers that have ran into all these small issues and fixed them and refined the process, found another problem, fixed it, refined the process, found another problem, fixed it, refined the process. They're not going to share that information with the new guy coming on the market, coming out with a Me Too product. And so I always think it's better to stay with the known entities, the proven products from people who actually were involved from the ground up of designing and changing the industry. For example, like Macmillan. When they come onto the scene, there wasn't a lot of composite stocks around. A matter of fact, a lot of the military sniper rifles still had wooden stocks. So they took the time and effort, and you just can't mimic that overnight by looking at it and saying, well, we can make something look just like it. You can. But you cannot touch or get to that 30 years of all these little hidden things that they've learned to make that stock the way it is and to shoot the way it does. You've got 30 years of learning to do to get to where they're at. Even though you made one to look like it, there's going to be things that are going to come up that you're going to be like, oh no, why is that happening? And if you want to be the customer with that product in your hand asking why that's happening, then that's what you're in for when you jump ship and you grab a lot of these new stocks coming onto the market. Just want to throw that part out there. You're going to spend a lot of hard-earned money when you build a custom rifle. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it really boils down to every single piece being as close to perfect as possible, including the action, in our case, the ACE system, the barrels, and stocks. All right, so without beating that to death, I think hopefully I tried to share enough information to share how passionate I am about this when it comes to the components, and boy, how one wrong ingredient can really mess up, like for example, the soup, one wrong, too much of this or too little of that, or the wrong ingredient can make a train wreck of the entire thing. And I think with rifles that can happen a lot, and we've seen it with stocks happen quite often. So we're really careful on that end and selecting and using the components, and just pass it along to you to do the same, and hopefully save you some heartache and headache that you could possibly run into when you're doing that. I do have one question and answer. We had a phone call yesterday. A gentleman had just getting ready to start into reloading precision rifle. He's loaded, handguns before. And I thought it was a great question. I just want to share a little bit here on the podcast when it comes to reloading. What we do and sort of how we go and attack for what purposes are that we use it for. And so he was asking about equipment and what equipment we use here when I'm reloading. So I do have a Forester Press single stage. That's one of my favorites. And when I'm reloading rifle cases, I actually use a full-length sizing die, something like a Redding full-length sizing die. I'll use a carbide button. I don't use neck dies, and I don't use bushing dies. There can be some issues to come up with those. In the grand scheme of things, I try to look at things as what issue is it solving and how many potential problems is it going to give me for other areas. So I only full-length size because I want to work the case. I want to bump the shoulder ever so slightly so it feeds and functions perfectly. Will bench rest shooters do other things to try to get out every ounce of accuracy? Yes. Does all the advanced hand loading techniques and all that stuff work? Yeah, in some scenarios for what they're using it for. But for me, for field use, for match shooting, for the type of shooting that we do, I would rather have a perfect feeding and functioning rifle, and I really don't think I'm giving up much on accuracy. You can buy Lapua brass that'll save you some of the steps of advanced hand loading. So, for example, in the past, I have neck turned, deburred flash holes, squared up primer pockets. All that's good stuff. I don't do it much anymore because I don't see the accuracy difference. I think if you use quality brass like Lapua, I don't really think it's necessary. So for new shooters, probably avoid neck turning and all of that stuff until you get comfortable doing it, because you can cause as many problems as you're solving if you do some of this stuff wrong. I don't anneal cases. So for the Hornady brass that we shoot, I might trim it one time, but 4 or 6 firings, I throw it away. I lose it at matches. It's no big deal. It's a little bit softer brass, I think, so maybe it doesn't last quite as long. And I don't, as maybe Lapua, but I don't force it to. I'm okay with, I got 3 to 5 firings through it. It's okay going into recycle bin. Get the other stuff out and start loading it and shooting it. I don't want to have problems. I don't want to have hardened brass, inconsistent neck tension, so on and so forth. I'm okay with getting 4, 5, 6 reloads out of Hornady brass, and some of the Lapua stuff you can get to last a little bit longer. But again, when I feel like for some shooters might think it's time to anneal at that point, I just throw the cases away. I don't anneal anything here. Another really important thing when you get into reloading is make sure that the day you size the case, you finish the process with a loaded round inside that case. This is really important. So every once in a while, we'll have a customer call us up and say, hey, I'm getting inconsistencies in accuracy. I'm getting flyers. We're getting a really crazy, weird variation in speeds. And what I'll commonly ask is, are you seating a bullet in the case? First, I'll ask if they're full-length sizing or anything like that, because neck sizing and other things can cause some donuts and all these other issues that go with that. Save that for another topic. But I'll ask them if they're seating a bullet inside the case the same day. And a lot of times they say no. They say, hey, I'll full-length size like 500 cases, and then I'll just seat bullets as I need them. Well, there's a problem with that. So what happens when you run a case into a full-length sizing die is you're forcing it up into the die. You're shrinking the case mouth down. You're undersizing it. And then as you pull it back out, it's going over expander ball and opening the case mouth up to accept the bullet. So in essence, it's opening the case mouth up, stretching it. And if you leave that case set for a day or two, some of those cases are going to want to return back to, or spring back to the size of the die. So remember, we're pushing the case up into the full-length sizing die. When it gets to the top, it's squishing the case mouth in. And then as it comes back out, you're opening up the case mouth over the expander ball to accept the bullet. That creates a little bit of a spring, and the mouth wants to slowly start closing again. My answer to that is make sure that when you work cases that you have enough time to end the whole process with loaded ammunition. Don't size cases and then let them lay for days and then start seating bullets. Because if you know what to look for, you'll feel it. When you're seating that bullet from case to case, you'll feel some of them, the bullets are seating a lot harder than others. That's really inconsistent neck tension, and that's going to cause you some problems on the line. And then the other thing that I do use a competition seating die. I think that's really important to support the bullet as it's being put into the case mouth, and it helps with alignment and just makes more consistent ammo. So Forrester Press, full-length sizing die, competition seating die, and I actually have a balance beam scale I'll use sometimes, but I do have 3 or 4 Hornady electronic scales that are all calibrated with the same weight, that are all running at the same time. And I keep an eye on them, make sure nothing goes out of calibration, but that way I'm filling cases a lot faster, as I'm dumping one and the other one's ready. So I'll have 3 or 4 of those on the bench, all calibrated with the same weights, and then verify that they're all calibrated properly, and then I'll just reload that way. I find that's a great way, and as a new shooter, I don't think any advanced hand loading techniques are going to help you all that much. If not, they might cause some issues. A website that I really like a lot, if you get a chance and you want to check it out, it's called Varmint Owls. Varmint, Varmint, Owls is ALS, varmintowls.com. He is a retired engineer out of California. He has a fantastic reloading page. Mirage, he's got a recoil calculator to tell you how much energy is being sent back to you, the shooter, with these different calibers, and it's just really a great website. So if you get a chance and you want to check out some advanced hand loading techniques or some reloading information, I find that his read, besides the factory books, so if you get a Hodgkin's reloading manual, if you get a Hornady reloading manual, of course, go buy their book, go buy the instructions. But Varmint Owl's website is probably one of the most in-depth advanced hand loading write-ups that I've seen in a long time, and it's really good stuff. So it's a really great read. Get a chance, log on there and check it out. Guys, I do want to take the time to say thank you for joining us here at the podcast. I've received lots of great emails over the last week or two. I super appreciate the feedback. It just makes me and keeps me excited to keep on the podcast and keep putting information out there. So thank you for all your support. Again, we don't take any sponsorship for the podcast. We feel that, and me personally, I feel that we don't want to have to be able to give opinions based on people that we might owe something to. So we try to keep the podcast free and clear of any type of sponsorship so we can just give honest opinions. Our support comes from just customers sending us a thank you in an email or maybe a follow-up. If you're ever interested in, of course, attending our shooting school or looking at our custom rifles, we certainly always appreciate that business as well. But send us some emails if you have some questions. Love to talk to you. Check us out on Facebook at Wolf Precision Inc. And want to thank you again for joining us. You are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.